October the 30th, 1993. On this day, a Hollywood heartthrob will die from a massive overdose of cocaine and heroin.
The call came in sometime after midnight. It came in as a seizure up on Sunset Boulevard at the Viper Room.
I walked out and I literally cartwheeled over him. He was lying on the sidewalk getting resuscitated by paramedics.
I didn't understand what had happened. You know, half an hour ago, he was, you know, seemingly no problem. And then boom.
This is the story of the last 24 hours of River Phoenix. Los Angeles, Saturday, October the 30th, 1993. River Phoenix wakes early. To the world, he's Hollywood's golden boy. Vegan, ethically minded, squeaky clean. The truth is very different. For over 2 years, River has been struggling to overcome a drug problem. Today, that problem will overcome him. River is working on a film called Dark Blood. He's been on the film for 2 months and has stayed off drugs all that time. But when he arrives for the last day of filming, director George Slauser notices River is behaving strangely.
There was a difference in, I'd say, body language. He could not judge distances perfectly well, and his walk was a little different than normal. He was someone who would never sit longer than, I think, 20 minutes without standing up from a chair. And that day he sat maybe for an hour without moving from the chair. He had been taking drugs the night before. That was obvious.
River has an on-again, off-again drug habit, but recently he's been finding that habit harder to manage. Until today, he's been clean on set, but it's been a struggle.
I saw him during the shooting of Dark Blood. He was in bad shape during that. And I think that had more to do with the drug problem at that point. That it was a difficult film. He was having a difficult time on it, trying to stop, detoxing, the pressure of having to do the role when you're not physically ready. It was a difficult, really difficult time for him.
Now, for the first time on the shoot, it looks like River is losing the battle.
And I got a call on my machine, and he says, it's River. He said, maybe I can see you over the weekend. I says, you know, I'm having a real hard time keeping my head above water. He says, in this crazy business. It was the first time I ever heard any uncertainty in River's voice.
So far, River Phoenix has had a charmed passage through Hollywood. Now, on the set of his 14th film, he's coming apart. River was 9 years old when his family moved to Hollywood. By the time he was 15, he was already getting noticed. He just had something special.
The first time I laid eyes on River Phoenix was when I was casting my movie, Night in the Life of Jimmy Reardon. I'd come from lunch and somebody said, well, you're gonna meet this kid named River. I said, River, is that his real name? And she said, yeah. I said, what? She said, River Phoenix. I said, whoa, what a name. I walked into the little reception area, and this kid stood up. And as he walked over towards me, I saw this light around him. And it was like a halo, and it was an aura. I mean, all of this happened within seconds. I just said, this is a star.
It was River's performance in the hit movie Stand By Me that thrust him into the limelight. Overnight, he became a teen idol. His face was on the cover of magazine after magazine, and he was getting thousands of fan letters every week. But River was more than just a pretty face. He could act too.
Every single take was excellent. You only did one take, or two maximum, and the enthusiasm and the intensity was there, so he was inspiring everybody else. People wanted to be around River.
I don't think I ever felt that something was false or fakey. I'm quite sensitive, I guess, to people who are either theatrical in the wrong way or are just saying lines which they don't understand or don't mean, you know, they don't know. It has a lot to do with, the pauses you make when you talk and how your voice goes and so on, and how, I would say, the body and the voice and the arms and the feet and everything and the eyes are in sync, or one thing. When you think or feel one thing, your feet should feel it too. If you don't, then you're acting the wrong way. And River, in that sense, was absolutely an actor, because I felt that his whole body was participating.
Soon, River was on Hollywood's A-list. He was Oscar-nominated for his role in Running on Empty, and his part in My Own Private Idaho won him the Best Actor award at the Venice Film Festival. After just a few years in Hollywood, River was earning almost $1 million a movie, and he was a pin-up the world over. But for River, the money and the recognition was not enough in itself.
He wanted really to be good in what he did. So at that level, you might say that his fame and his success was an adversary to his peace, and that he was being seen. And also knowing that his family came more and more to depend on him because he was the main breadwinner for a clan.
Aged 17, River found himself supporting his parents, 4 brothers and sisters, paid staff, and hangers-on.
He was the golden child who went to Hollywood, became a movie star, and so he had the pressure of having to support his family, to bring in income. I can only imagine that it presents a kind of pressure that, so when the work stops and you're like, ooh, what am I gonna do next? Where's the next job coming from? I know I'll get something, but, what do I do in my downtime? How do I take the pressure off? I think that's another avenue where, partying and drinking and, having that kind of life can really, present itself and as a healthy alternative. This kind of like, oh, I need this because I'm gonna have to go back to work again soon, and I'm gonna have to stay clean for that, and I'm gonna have to, I just want to be me for the small period of time, and I just want to have the pressure off. He had a lot of pressure. It's a big family to have to support and to feed and to house and clothe.
The pressure on his young shoulders was enormous, and from time to time he needed to escape. Music was one release. He would jam for hours late into the night, often falling asleep over his guitar. The other way he relieved the pressure was to take drugs. River had the money and the freedom to do whatever he wanted, and his friends knew he had to be watched.
With River, you always had, someone had to be there. Someone had to chaperone his drug use. And if they didn't chaperone his drug use, it was dangerous. It was always dangerous.
River has been on the set of the movie Dark Blood for 8 hours. He's on edge, feeling terrible after a late night taking drugs, and so far today, all he's done is sit and wait.
It took us all day to set it up because we had just come back to LA and we had other sets, and so, the actors had to wait around most of the day for this one scene.
Director George Slouser is watchful of his star.
I felt that I had to be sure that everything was going to go okay. It's like you have it's a bit silly to say, but if you have someone who's sick, then you might take along, to sit down somewhere. You take care a little more because you don't know exactly how things will develop.
First positions, please.
Finally, the cameras are ready to roll. It's time for River to perform. But of all the scenes he's ever done, the next is the one he's come to dread. He'd long idolized his co-star Judy Davis, but now he was getting the chance to work with her. She seemed to be doing everything she could to make his life a misery.
Good.
She was very difficult to work with, and we had a bad relationship. I was very irritated by the way she treated River, by making it difficult for him to act, whispering instead of talking, or when you could help, not helping. Yeah. The only time I suffered through an actress, I've never had any problems with actors ever before in my career, but she made up for 40 years or something, or 30 years, because she was in a kind of way impossible, and she made it tough for River also. He complained to me many times that she was making it tough for him.
River was so sensitive, and I don't think that he'd maybe experienced even until that particular movie, people that weren't kind to him at some level.
River felt the antagonism deeply. He phoned friends in tears. Yet for 7 long weeks he endured it, asking George Slouser to postpone the love scenes.
He asked me, can I play this scene the last day, because I don't feel like doing it halfway and touching her and whatever. I mean, he'd said, you know, I'm getting goose pimples if I, have to touch her arm.
Now the scene can be delayed no longer. It'll be the last of River's short life. And in just a few hours, he'll take the drugs that will leave him fighting for his life on an LA sidewalk. River Phoenix has 16 hours to live. He's on the set of his last film, Dark Blood, and he's in a bad way. He's edgy and nervous about the next scene. It's a love scene with Judy Davis, a woman he says makes his skin crawl. But so far 3 takes are in the can, and River has held it together. Now it's take 4.
Mark it. Mark. Frame. Action.
Somebody's gonna die. Believe me.
The scene is over and the shot should have ended when the director shouted cut. But when the crew gathered 2 days later, after River had died, they realized something very strange had happened.
At the end of the 4th take, it was cut, wrap, it's a print. The lights came down, and River became this perfect silhouette, lit by these candles, almost like you're in a church. River walked up to the camera and stood there for about 5 seconds. And then I had realized, oh, the camera was still rolling, and I turned it off.
River died just hours after this shot was taken.
It was the eeriest thing I've ever experienced through my camera. It still gives me the chills.
Filming over, River leaves set for the night, but the day's events have left him shaken. River was emotionally fragile. The smallest thing could upset him. This vulnerability had its roots in River's childhood. River spent his early years on the road in Latin America. He wasn't River Phoenix then, he was River Bottom. His parents, John and Arlen Bottom, were missionaries for a Christian cult called the Children of God. River's dad, John, held the grand title Archbishop of Venezuela and the Caribbean. They went wherever God sent them. Mexico, Puerto Rico, Venezuela. It was an unsettled existence. They had no friends, no home. Often struggling to make ends meet, they trusted in God to provide. Actually, it was often River. At the age of 5, he and his younger sister Rain were busking on the streets to feed the family. After 3 years on the road, his parents had had enough. In Caracas, they threw themselves on the mercy of Father Stephen Wood.
I was at that time pastor of this church and had been a friend of the Children of God for many years. And this family showed up saying that they were leaving the Children of God and needed help. They had decided that they could no longer accept the directions they were receiving from headquarters, they found them increasingly at odds with what they read in the Bible.
The Children of God would later become notorious for their ideas about sex. Teaching that sex was just another way of showing God's love, couples often swapped partners. Children were encouraged to sleep in the same bed as their parents while they made love, and children were to be initiated into sexual practices at the age of 4. Whether River was involved in any sexual practices has never been ascertained. His close friends refused to talk about it. Soon after these practices were advocated, his parents wanted out, but their decision left them stranded.
They found themselves in a foreign country with absolutely no funds, no place to live, no money to buy food for their children, and no way to get back to the United States, which was their goal. They asked for hospitality and help. Meanwhile, they were going to try to earn enough to eat out of, and then to see how they would somehow get back to the U.S.
Father Wood gave them room and board, and in exchange, River and Rain performed Christian songs during Sunday service.
The most well-known was that You've Got to Be a Baby, but River sang it not just in Spanish, but also in English, French. He sang it in Japanese and Swahili. I'm not sure that he was all that great of a singer, but he was a little kid. He was a great entertainer in his singing. And the fact that he could even play this huge guitar, this guitar that was so much bigger than him, was impressive. It was our most popular service, and it was literally standing room only. But he had the attention of absolutely everyone, while his little sister was out kind of working the crowd. I think on the streets where they had been trained, she would be going around asking for money. But here it was just kind of get the people to clap and to sing along.
After 4 months, Father Wood found the family a way back to Florida on a cargo ship. On arrival, they changed their name to Phoenix to symbolize a new beginning. But River's early years would leave their mark.
He told me he suffered from the upbringing. I guess part of his, vulnerability and fragility, which is also part of which why he's a good actor, is maybe due to that background. You can become strong because you have this kind of tough childhood, or you can get obviously traumatized. So I think it's a bit of both.
River was vulnerable. He took the knocks of everyday life hard, and drugs were an easy escape. River Phoenix has just 6 hours left to live. He's had a tough day on the set of his latest film, Dark Blood. But now he's back at his hotel where he can let go with his family and friends. Dickie Rude has been a close friend of River's for 2 years.
He was just in good spirits, His family was around, his brother and his sister and his girlfriend, and he was happy to be, off of the set. Things were jovial.
Dickie's wife, Abby, is River's personal assistant. Samantha Mathis has been dating River for the last 6 months. And some of River's family have flown in to see him. Joaquin, his only brother, is here. And so is Rain, River's sister, who shares his passion for music.
Yeah, Rainbow Leaf, Liberty Summer, they loved River dearly. He was the best older brother ideal you could imagine, nurturing, caring, protecting, and would go to him for advice, and he had, a great deal of experience with all of their emotions and differences.
There's no sign now of the stress he was under earlier on set.
It was a normal, welcome back to LA type of atmosphere. He was great. He seemed to be completely on his mark. There was no clue as to any kind of haywire going on or potential for that.
So far today, River has stayed clean, and that's the plan for the night ahead. He wants to keep a clear head because he's been asked to play at one of LA's coolest new clubs, the Viper Room. River is due to appear alongside one of his music heroes, but tragically, he'll never make it onto the stage. The movies dominated River's teenage life. They had to. They were his family's bread and butter. But River had grown up playing music. It was his all-consuming passion.
When he wasn't working as an actor on my movie, he was playing the guitar or he was writing music. He was always creating. I remember going to his room a lot of times, and it was music books and song and notes and everything for his music. Because one of the memories I have is River's hair hanging down over his face and River hanging over a guitar. And so I remember seeing him a lot working on his music because he loved music.
According to him, it meant to him more than the acting. Like, for him, the music, he was more into music than into being an actor. He wanted to be a musician.
At 17, he got the chance to do just that. The family moved to Gainesville, a hippie town in Florida famous for its music scene. They bought a large ranch just outside the town and employed Dirk Drake as the family tutor. And when Dirk first met River, he recognized a passion for music.
I pulled up into the driveway, and there was a room that perhaps had been a garage, I'm not sure, but had big sliding glass doors, and I got out looking around. And when I came through, this teenage kid pops up, and he's got an Ovation guitar, and he's all excited to show me the engineering of it. I just remember thinking, this kid's a musician. He's so on it, and it was so important to him to share that guitar with me. Gainesville had a thriving music scene in the mid-1980s. This was the first place that the emerging punk rock, post-punk rock scene was happening. And I think putting the band together was a primary focus in coming here and finding musicians that would be complementary to the songs he'd written and the tastes that he had.
In 1988, River formed Alika's Attic with his younger sister, Rain. He threw himself into writing, turned the garage into a rehearsal studio, and booked the band on a 2-week tour of the East Coast. He put everything into the band and secured a 2-year development deal with Island Records. If, in that time, the band could produce a good demo tape, they would finance an album. The band was River's plan for the future, and he desperately wanted to be taken seriously as a musician.
It was very difficult for River because he didn't want his name or his movie star status attached to his band's gigs. And it never seemed to fail. They'd get a gig at a club, and the proprietors of the club, I guess eager to get people through the gate, mentioned, River Phoenix and his sister Rainbow. It was disappointing because he wanted his music to be taken for the music and not the music of the Hollywood star.
Any chance River got to prove that he wasn't just a teen actor with rock star pretensions, he leapt at. On his last day, he'd get such a chance. River is letting his hair down after being on set all day. He and his friends have left their hotel and are hitting the town. Just after midnight, Samantha, Rain, Joaquin and River arrive at the Viper Room, Johnny Depp's club on Sunset Strip. River has brought his guitar. In the corner of the club sits a small stage. Tonight, Johnny Depp's band will be playing. Among the lineup is Flea, bass player for the Red Hot Chili Peppers and one of River's closest friends. River's planning to get up on stage and jam with some of the best musicians in town. For this, he's staying clean. Pleasant Gaiman, LA columnist, is also in the crowd.
It was very smoky and very crowded. It was a mixture of Hollywood hipsters and band people and people that just wanted to see Johnny Depp play in a band. Some giggling, teeny boppy kind of girls. The rock scene then was really fertile in Los Angeles. It was, there was a really hugely thriving underground rock scene, and the clubs had a decent crowd. They were very crowded, but they weren't overpacked with just people milling around not knowing what the hell was going on. The Viper Room, it was actually one of the first, like, cool clubs that was trying not to be an underground shithole. There was, like, big, burly, giant security men there with earpieces and the whole velvet rope mentality, and it was really excessive. It was really Hollywood. It was really just gross.
Samantha, Rain, Joaquin and River find a booth at the back of the club. River's waiting to get on stage. The lineup tonight will include Al Jorgensen of Ministry, Gibby Haynes of the Butthole Surfers, and of course Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. River's happy. He's staying away from drugs so he can jam with his close friend Flea. But that's not going to happen. River and Flea had been great friends since they met 3 years earlier on the set of My Own Private Idaho. Flea, a sometime actor, had a small part in the film. Filming began in Portland, Oregon, and almost immediately cast and crew realized they were involved in something special. They worked hard, they played hard. River and many of the younger actors moved into director Gus Van Sant's house. The day's work on set would be followed by jam sessions late into the night. This footage was shot by River's friend, Matt Ebert.
When he and Flea met on Idaho, you know, they got along like, you know, brother and brother. Like, they just went arm in arm into the sunset with it. Like, they just, you know, played guitar together and really, like, you know, became really close friends almost immediately.
Flea was fascinated by River's talent as an actor, and River is a fantastic actor who is wanting to be a musician. So it's a natural attraction and a natural source of friendship and learning for each other.
He loved him. He loved Flea. River was crazy about Flea.
From this moment on, River and Flea became inseparable. And on his last day, Flea would be with River until the very end. Inside the Viper Room, River has made his way to the stage. He's expecting to join the band, but there's a problem. Homicide detective Mike Lee later pieced together the events of the evening.
What's going on? What?
When he arrived there were more than enough musicians, as there quite often is in that type of a situation, so he could not get up onto the stage and play that particular night.
Well, I got good news and bad news for you first. Give me the bad news. Give me the good news. I love you. But you can't play the night. You're serious.
I heard through some of the people that we talked with that Flea was the one who said, no, you can't come up and play.
Play bass.
Mr. Phoenix was disappointed that he wasn't able to get up on and join in the jam session. And because of that disappointment, he elected to get into the drugs.
River idolized Flea as a person and a musician and was excited about playing side by side with him on stage. Now he's been shut out, he retreats into the crowd and begins to look for drugs.
If you were of a mind that you wanted to go in and party with drugs, they were available. And, you know, it was your choice, whatever you wanted to do. It was not at all hard to find drugs out on the strip.
There was drugs everywhere. Probably the main things were cocaine and heroin. Plus, at the age of early to mid-20s, you still have the hallowed misconception that you're immortal, you know? You still look pretty, you don't really get a hangover, you know? I mean, you can, sure, I can do all of this, you know? It's not gonna have any consequences.
All right, you know what? I know what you need. I know what you need.
So I know that he was disappointed, and being disappointed in something will, I think we've all been there, where instead of reaching over and closing the door, you sometimes slam the door.
River is about to take the drugs that will kill him. My Own Private Idaho introduced River to Flea. It was also where his drug use first became dangerous. By 1989, River had played some interesting roles, but they were all safe, chosen for him by his mother and agent as suitable for the River Phoenix image. Yet River longed for something different, dangerous and adult, longed for a role he could call his own. The script for My Own Private Idaho offered that role. This was an art house film about male prostitutes based on a play by Shakespeare, about as different and edgy as River could have hoped for.
It was very, very cool at that point in time in youth culture to focus on the dark side and focus on the beautiful loser and the romantic lost boys and girls of our culture. And River was attracted to that and curious about it. And this was his chance to jump into it.
His character, Mike Waters, was a heroin-addicted rent boy, and River was determined to do the part justice. With his personal assistant, Matt Ebert, River spent days hanging with rent boys on the streets of Portland, Oregon.
Now we're mixing ourselves up with street kids and, you know, boys and girls, young boys and girls, and the drug element is there. We have dealers, we have Johns, we have, you know, we're kind of on the underbelly of all of Portland, trying to scrape up some history. We're going to bookshops and, you know, little bathhouses and, you know, looking for any kind of seedy. We're looking for it because we have to recreate it. We have to, you know, do it, and we want to do it right. We don't want to just, you know, invent, you know, this for an audience. We want to create, we want to reflect it. And we want to do it honestly. He was really into research. He was very big on, like, okay, I got to learn all about these characters. We'd go into what they call Vaseline Alley, and we'd meet street hustlers, and we'd take them home and we'd interview them.
Here I am walking in the motel room in my bathtub. I stand next to you, and I say, "So you're gonna take your pants off?" Mm-hmm. What is your reaction?
Mind-boggling stuff, you know, like the lives you would run into with this. And you're thinking, you know, here I am with this. We're actually doing, you know, trying to find out what it's like to do that, you know, what these kids actually have to go through. And a lot of it was really painful, you know. And I think that while it can feed an actor, it also can be dangerous. You know, the closer you come to a really dangerous environment and a situation, the closer that environment gets to you, too.
One of the fundamentals of acting is research. You know, there's a certain amount you can bring from within, but then there's a lot you need from without. And when we were on the streets of Idaho, and he was acting, and we were all acting with street kids who were literally heroin addicts, and you knew they were heroin addicts because they had tracks in their hands, and they talked about it on the film. So that River would try that would be, I can't imagine him not trying that, actually. I mean, being as young as he was, and as brave as he was.
River had drunk before, smoked some dope, snorted some coke, but all was in moderation. Now he knew no restraints. As the parties at Gus's rolled on night after night, his drug use escalated.
Because I feel there's a theme.
Xanax, Valium, Vicodin, Percodan, Percocet, you know, drug after drug after pill after pill after pill, smoking pot, drinking alcohol, snorting cocaine, snorting heroin or smoking heroin. We did a lot of drugs. You know, we did a lot of drugs.
What had started as character research was now becoming much more dangerous.
We're not made of Teflon. We're skin and bones. And, you know, I think that's when, you know, that's when his addiction really started to take off.
However hard he battled it, the urge would always be there. In moments of stress or anxiety, the temptation would be hard to resist. The Viper Room, the club which will become infamous in less than 1 hour, is nearing capacity as Johnny Depp's band gets going. Upset that he couldn't get on stage and jam with Flea, Rivers scored some drugs. He heads into the bathroom to collect.
Here he is coming off a period of a dry spell where he's working on a movie that's not going well. And he's frustrated and he needs release and he needs to relax, and all he can think of to do is, you know, go out and get loaded.
Rain, Joaquin and River's girlfriend, Samantha Mathis, are in a booth at the back of the club. They're completely unaware of the horror that's about to unfold.
He ingested a quantity of drug that appeared to be heroin and cocaine in powder form. It appears that it was snorted, and the reaction was almost immediate.
River has snorted a speedball, cocaine and heroin mixed together.
When it works great. When it doesn't work, you die. That's like Russian roulette.
Several sources told me that the words were, this is too much, or words to that effect, too much, too much.
River is clearly in trouble. Someone offers him a Valium to calm him down. His heart is beating wildly, misfiring. The cocaine causing it to race out of control, the heroin telling it to slow. He stumbles out into the bar. He has just 1 hour to live. River's drug habit really took hold after My Own Private Idaho. He began to spend more and more time in LA. Part of the reason was his growing friendship with Flea. But LA was dangerous for River. The crowds he ran with partied hard.
It's hard to be young and cool and hip in Los Angeles with money and time and shitloads of exotic drugs at your disposal. There's a point at which drugs, sex, rock and roll can be personally, maybe culturally, artistically rewarding, and there's a point where they can be very destructive. And River was finding those boundaries.
More often than not, River was crossing those boundaries.
My band, the Ringling Sisters, was holding we used to do annual orphanage benefits. Anyway, at one of them we were having at the Roxy. There was a really cute boy passed out backstage in the hallway and just getting worse and worse, like sweating and just, looking like he wasn't getting up. And I was like running around being a stage manager and making, doing raffles with the audience and stuff. And finally, I looked down and I'm like, who is that really cute and really fucked up boy that's laying on the floor? We have to get him out of here. And someone said, that's River Phoenix. I'm like, that's River Phoenix? Jesus.
In the periods between Idaho and going back to Oregon to work on Evening Cowgirls Get the Blues and seeing him then, it was taking its toll. The drugs were definitely beating him down. And, his skin was getting bad, his hair was getting bad. Everything just looked rougher and, more ripped up.
River's family were concerned about his visible deterioration and confronted him. But River refused to admit he had a problem.
They were such a beautiful spiritual family and so supportive of him in so many ways. But, like most families, I think a little painfully unaware of the realities that he was going through in terms of the drug addiction.
The family home had always been River's refuge. It was a place he could rest, recuperate, and clean up. But life at home had changed. The family was now attracting hordes of hangers-on. Many of them had drug habits and just wanted to party with the young movie star. Temptation was everywhere.
I turned to River and said, a lot of these people are not very well educated and they're completely reactionary and they're just partying hardy and living a glamorous life from one moment to the next. And if they're fucking their lives up, it's not your responsibility and you shouldn't enable that. And if they're fucking your life up, then it's your responsibility to detach yourself from that.
By his last year, River was working hard to clean up his act. But the temptation was always there. Clean periods were always followed by a binge. River's life became a struggle.
Those months were tough. They were tough on everybody who was hovering around the supernova, because it all of a sudden just exploded and was gone.
Inside the Viper room, River has just taken a massive overdose of cocaine and heroin. His body is struggling to survive, but he can still be saved. He just needs help, fast. River Phoenix has less than an hour to live. He's gone to the Viper room on LA's Sunset Strip. His sister Rain, brother Joaquin and girlfriend Samantha Mathis are in a booth drinking. They think River's on stage getting ready to jam with friends. Actually, he's been shut out of the jam session and, disappointed, has just snorted a massive speedball, cocaine and heroin combined. River's body has gone into shock.
It's one thing to use heroin and cocaine and everything on a daily basis. Your system becomes used to it. Your tolerance stays the same. But when you start and stop and start and stop and start and stop and then always go back to where you left off, you run the risk of overdosing and killing yourself. He was a kid. Kids make mistakes.
Back at the table, River's having a difficult time. It's obvious he's not feeling well, but no one's aware of the effects that the drugs are having on his internal organs. Toxicologist Dan Anderson later analyzed River's blood.
There was a very significant amount of heroin and cocaine in his system. There was so much cocaine there, it's astronomical. It's 8 times what we consider lethal. He either didn't realize the purity of the drug and took his standard amount that he normally took, or he took way too much. A body can only tolerate so much. And after that tolerance is over with, you're gonna die of the drug.
What started out as a fun family reunion is rapidly turning into a nightmare.
Hey, wait a minute.
By his last year, River's drug use had hit its peak. Friends and family pleaded with him to get clean. He started to listen, and the periods between binges grew longer. He began working on a new music project with Sasa Raphael. In April, River was approached about a new film, Dark Blood, but there were worries that his drug use had taken too large a toll and he needed to rest.
I called River more or less every 2 weeks when he was in Florida. And I wanted to know if he was okay and if he was still in a good mood, if he still liked the story. A little bit, if you want, not to check, but to feel how he was. And I was aware, obviously, that he had been taken drugs before. I was hoping that he would be, I would say, calm.
River's father, John, had recently moved to a farm in Costa Rica, but he realized there was a problem and intervened.
His father flew up from his farm, and he never does that. He did at this time. He was just was not interested in coming to this part of the world at all. But he flew up specifically to convince his son not to go film the next movie.
John was just saying, give it a break. I would hope that you can get back to the garden. Take a break. Don't do any more projects for a while. Come live in Costa Rica. Work in the garden. Let's get back to being a family.
But River wanted to work with co-star Judy Davis, whom he admired so much, and he was the family breadwinner. He had some 30 people to support. He decided to do the movie. For 7 weeks, the cast and crew of Dark Blood lived and worked in the middle of the Utah desert. All that time, River stayed clean.
I was quite busy, so that there were many times when I started to get the feeling I am so busy with, the preparation of the shoot and the cameras and the this and the that I was not spending maybe enough time with River.
Finally, the location wrapped, and the production was moved back to LA for 2 weeks in the studio. River was heading back to Partyland. He took his leave from director George Slauser.
Before leaving, he said, okay, bye, going back to the bad town of LA. And I didn't realize what he meant with the word bad. Unfortunately, only after his death, I started to understand what the implications were in the word for him.
4 days later, River would snort the speedball that killed him. Inside the club, River has been suffering badly from a drug overdose, vomiting and passing out. At first, Rain and Joaquin weren't aware of just how bad things had got, but as his condition worsens, they drag him outside for some air. As soon as River's body hits the street, he goes into seizures. The vegan with the squeaky clean image is now dying of a drug overdose.
The people around him at that time, it was a kid, his brother, young kid, Joaquin, and he's dying in front of them, and they don't know what to do. And the people in the bar don't know what to do. They watch this celebrity move around, and they watch this famous person. Do we say something is happening to this famous person? The fame itself kept him from getting what he needed to live.
Whether the fact that River is a celebrity, or the fact that drugs are involved, or the fact that they're terrified by this sudden turn of events, the result is the same. No one calls for an ambulance for a full 5 minutes. Finally, Joaquin takes action. All 911 calls are recorded. This is Joaquin's call.
Yeah, he's having seizures on Sunset and Larrabee. Please come here. Okay, calm down a little bit, okay? What's the address where you need it? It's Sunset and Larrabee. It's at the Viper Room. He's laying on the cement. Is he breathing? I don't know. The last I checked, they said he was breathing. Is he fucking breathing? I don't know if he's breathing. Please, you gotta get over here with the ambulance. Who's with him right now? My sister and some people. Your sister? Yeah. Okay, can you talk to her from where you are? I kind of. She's trying to give him mouth to mouth. Please get to over here, please. Calm down, okay? Sir, calm down. Tell her not to give him out.
It's 4 more minutes before the paramedics arrive. River is lying still. His seizures have stopped and his breathing is shallow. The speedball is attacking his heart. Beating wildly out of sync, his heart is failing, pumping little or no blood. He's running out of time.
River Phoenix was lying on the sidewalk, unresponsive, with a couple of friends around him. And he was pulseless, he was non-breathing, and had no heart activity. We immediately started CPR, intubated him to control his airway, and started an IV, and gave him a series of drugs in an attempt to restart his heart.
Back at the Hotel Nico, 2 of River's closest friends, Dickie and Abby Roode, have no idea their friend is in trouble.
We got a phone call at the hotel, a hysterical phone call. I can't remember from who, whether it was his brother or his sister. We jumped in the car and rushed up the street. It wasn't that far away, but it was a terrifying shock. Terrifying shock to see your best friend lying on the sidewalk with paramedics standing over him and a crowd of people around dressed up in Halloween costumes, and it was just incomprehensible for me.
Having failed to restart his heart, the paramedics prepare to transport the lifeless young actor to the closest emergency room. News of the incident has spread into the club. Flea runs outside and demands to travel with River to the hospital. But it's too late for River Jude Phoenix. He's pronounced dead at 1:51 a.m., October 31st, 1993.
I remember when I heard about it, I remember where I was. I remember being just devastated, that he died that way, And I was surprised, despite thinking that I wouldn't be surprised.
I've heard people say it was his time and he was ready to go, and that's bullshit. That's bullshit. He loved life and he cherished and nurtured life around him, and I'm sure his own would have been right there with it as something cherished and nurtured.
I went with his sister and we brought his ashes home. And I remember this as long as I live. I gave his ashes to his mother, and she held them like a baby. And it was one of the most tragic things I've ever seen in my life.
He's become a kind of mystical being in people's lives, somebody that inspires them, not because of his tragedy, but because of that quality that he had, which was always spiritual, so that when you see him, that magical thing didn't die with him.
He was a good friend. He brought out the best in you. And I miss him a lot.
Gonzo journalist.
He was a genius.
Larger-than-life character.
Hunter, to his dying day, wanted to be thought of as an outlaw.
One of the most famous writers in the world.
Hunter is one of the funniest American writers in all history.
Hunter S. Thompson was a man whose life was fueled by drugs, alcohol, and the desire to expose the truth about America.
He represents everything that's wrong in this country. Down the line.
He was worshipped by fans, loved by celebrities. But in the end, it wasn't enough. After bringing his closest family members to his home in Colorado,
He went as long as he could.
he wrote the final chapter to his amazing life. February 19th, 2005. Hunter S. Thompson is at Owl Farm, his ranch and refuge just outside of Aspen, Colorado. He's 67 years old. In just 24 hours, he'll be dead. At the beginning of his last day, Thompson's 40-year-old son Juan and grandson Will are at the farm for a visit. Also present that day is Ben Fee.
Hunter's family came up to visit, and they were to stay for the weekend, and it had snowed, and Juan and Jennifer and Will were playing in the snow, and it was family time. It didn't happen very often.
But underneath the seemingly innocent scene, Hunter is hiding a dark secret. This is the last time he'll be seeing his family.
I think he must have known when he asked them down that that's when he was going to do it.
But before he goes, he has a few loose ends he wants to take care of.
Juan, get your ass in here, would ya?
What is it, Dad?
Something for you there.
Thompson presents Juan with a few of his most precious keepsakes. 2 silver cups that are Thompson family heirlooms. The box contains rare limited editions of an unpublished novel and an Aztec medallion, a reminder of Thompson's wild days.
Yes, you can. It's yours, okay?
He trusted Juan more than anyone.
Yeah.
And he knew that Juan loved him a lot. And he loved Juan a lot.
I can't take that, Dad.
Damn it all, I said take it. You understand what a present is?
The preparations for his death in less than 22 hours have begun. More than 3 decades before, Hunter S. Thompson exploded onto the scene when he wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, a series of articles describing a drug-fueled trip across the desert.
You can read it out loud. It's like poetry.
It's the choice of words and the images and the narrative and the voice. It's just brilliant.
And he understood the way that writing works as a voice and the way it's like breathing and the importance of its sound. Writing is a very intimate form of communication. You can't shout it to people because there's no sound involved. When you read something, the sound is occurring inside your own head, and it's a result of the rhythms that are created on the page. And Hunter was a great student of these rhythms, and he understood writing physically.
It was fast, it was rebellious, and it was deeply shocking to mainstream America. Hunter Thompson became one of the leading figures of the 70s counterculture. His wild, drug-crazed antics, his politics, and his constant questioning of authority made him a hero for generations of young rebels across the globe.
I think probably Hunter mostly will be remembered as the wild man, the drug addict, the alcoholic.
He crossed divides, spending time with both the Hells Angels and President Nixon. He was immortalized as Uncle Duke in the Doonesbury cartoon strips. And twice, Hollywood came calling, turning his real-life adventures into movies.
There were people who were big Hunter Thompson fans who had never read his work. They liked the persona.
But his lasting legacy will be his writing. He broke the mold, creating a new kind of journalism, where he and drug-crazed antics became the center of the story. It was called Gonzo. By the end of his life, Thompson could look back on an incredible journey. He'd invented a whole new genre of writing, become a cultural icon, but his wild lifestyle came at a price. His body was now falling apart. A broken leg, 2 hip operations, and constant pain meant he could no longer live up to the legend he'd created. In less than 20 hours, Hunter S. Thompson will be dead. His final evening is spent in the cozy confines of his house in Colorado.
I met Hunter Thompson in the winter of 2004 at a party at his house, and Hunter asked me if I'd stay up there to write and doing some filming behind the scenes, and so I began going up at nights.
I mean, why did we bet on this game?
Once you stepped into the kitchen at Owl Farm, you were in his world. You could see a Tiffany's clock from a close friend right next to a petrified beaver, Muhammad Ali's golden boxing gloves, things that you'll never see anywhere else. It's really quite a museum.
Ben Fee has been living at Owl Farm for several weeks, helping Thompson write a weekly online column and recording his time spent with Thompson on videotape. Thompson's second wife, Anita, is also there.
In hindsight, it was the perfect setting for Hunter. He had his son and his grandson and his daughter-in-law, and he had Anita. And those were the people who he loved more than anything at that point. And he wanted them to be around for the release of his soul.
In the week before his death, Thompson wrote that for him, there were no more games, no more bombs, no more guns, no more wild fun.
He'd been talking about dying ever since I knew him, but talking about actually shooting himself for I'm something like a year and a half, telling people close to him that this is what he was going to do.
He's now 67. He feels that going on is simply being greedy. All he's got to do is relax. What he's planning won't hurt a bit.
It was very succinct, very brief, and it was, the whole no more fun part is where the real meat of it is, in that Hunter realized that he just could not enjoy himself because he was physically as well as psychologically worn down like the eraser of a number 2 pencil.
Unknown to his family, this is the last evening they will ever spend with Hunter Thompson. 67 years earlier, on July 18th, 1937, Hunter Stockton Thompson came into the world. He grew up in the conservative southern town of Louisville, Kentucky.
Hunter's early childhood was picture perfect. One could not imagine a more American family existence.
By the time he was a teenager, Thompson was already an important figure in his neighborhood. Lou Ann Murphy was his girlfriend.
We went to movies, we went to parties in people's homes. Sometimes we just hung out on my front porch. He was very confident, had a great air of assurance, and his body language just said, you know, I know where I'm going.
I haven't run across anybody who had the natural charisma that he had. You could walk into a room full of people, and the people would be gravitating to Hunter because he had a magnetism that none of the rest of us had.
His family wasn't rich, but Thompson wanted to be part of the Louisville elite. He used his charisma and early writing talent to gain access to the exclusive Athenaeum Literary Association.
The Literary Association gave him entree into that elite part of Louisville society, and I think he wanted desperately to be that.
A lot of them would be considered top young men in high school years in Louisville, Kentucky. He liked that.
But the picture book life changed forever when Thompson was 14.
His father, who had been this gregarious, quiet, but interesting, methodical individual, slowly but surely became fatigued, became ill.
A debilitating neurological disease was attacking Thompson's father. Eventually, he was admitted to the local veterans hospital.
And Hunter was completely powerless to do anything about it. It was a form of torture, you might say. And there he was, daily, watching his father wilt, wither, die.
On July 3rd, 1952, Thompson's father died. It hit the 14-year-old hard.
And I remember Hunter coming to my house at twilight, and we sat on our front porch for a long, long time, and then he would get up and pace. And I think he was just stunned.
An angry young Hunter Thompson started to lash out, vandalizing property and causing havoc around town.
He drank more than some of us did, and he had such a wonderful imagination. Instead of just drinking, he would want to go and do things, and some of the things were not great.
He pushed over mailboxes and smashed light bulbs and got drunk, you know, and chased after women, and he didn't go to school. He was fairly innocent, prankish, boyish behavior, which he sustained to the end of his life.
But now, Thompson, 52 years later, can feel his own body falling apart. He's in constant pain, and he's made up his mind. His death will not be slow and lingering. It's the middle of the night at Hunter S. Thompson's farm in Colorado. He has less than 16 hours to live. His family has come for the weekend and are now gathered in the living room along with his second wife, Anita. They've been married for several years. At times, it's a volatile relationship.
Hunter and Anita, they had their battles. They had their spats and their wars and yelling matches. They were like the Gonzo, Sid and Nancy. They could really have a go, but then, you know, they'd love each other right afterwards.
But tonight, Hunter is far from being the peacemaker. He and his wife are on a collision course.
At me. Loaded? I don't care if it's not loaded, just don't
Dr. Gary Kennedy is a psychiatrist who specializes in the effects of old age.
Sober as a judge.
With increasing age, and especially with people that become physically frail, heavy alcohol intake has a direct effect on the brain. And what's important here is those effects can make one less conscious, less aware of the effect that your behavior is having on other people.
He was a very big human being, full spectrum. And that all the wonderful, exciting, good, kind, generous, all of that was absolutely true.
Not loaded.
I don't care. What do you mean it's not loaded? You're drunk.
The dark side of Hunter was really bad. He was vicious.
The fear, you know, of having a gun pointed at you, it's pretty terrifying. So that shook Anita.
This was not fun. This was not a fun person. This was a really pained, angry, tortured man.
Hunter's antics have started a row with his wife that will simmer for the remaining hours of his life.
You know what? I can't take you anymore. I hate you.
41 years before, Hunter S. Thompson had left the stuffiness of Louisville, Kentucky far behind and was living in San Francisco with his first wife, Sondi, and their infant son.
I was very happy to be a mother. I had these two men in my life that I was madly in love with both. And so it was a very happy time for me.
Thompson decided to dedicate his life to writing. He began traveling, writing freelance articles for a variety of small magazines and newspapers.
He wanted to be a really good writer, you know, and he was so disciplined. I mean, he was very disciplined. He wrote every day. He rewrote everything. When I typed something for him, I mean, it had to be straight edges, you know, I mean, and there couldn't be any mistakes. It was well done. It was re-edited, exactly the right word. That was his idea of writing.
Thompson struggled to make a living, but he was determined to make it as a writer. In the spring of 1965, he started an ambitious project, an inside account of what was then a little-known motorcycle gang, the Hells Angels.
We had the Angels over to the house, and I'm thinking, you know, these are nice people, you know. They're not boring, and they're not insurance agents, you know. They're really not. They're kind of okay people. I didn't realize that they were, you know, they were also dealing drugs, they were killing people, all kinds of stuff. But I didn't know that.
After a year of research, Thompson wrote Hells Angels, a strange and terrible saga of the outlaw motorcycle gang.
And he had to be careful with these guys, and he was.
When the book was published, the Hells Angels wanted a cut of the money. When Thompson refused, they beat him to within an inch of his life.
He was stomped, and really fortunately, you know, one of the guys, great, big, huge guy, got him out just in the nick of time, you know, because Hunter could easily have been killed.
But the literary critics were kinder. They loved the book. Finally, after years of rejection, Thompson had his first success.
Hunter I never heard him. You know, he had been a kind of an unsuccessful journalist for many years, sports writer, pretty much scuffling and getting a lot of rejections and failure. For 10 years, he was not a success. And he came out with this book called Hells Angels, and it was stunning. You know, it was just a magnificent book, and I'd never read anything like it before.
But at the same time Thompson was beginning his literary career, he was also beginning a long-standing relationship with drugs.
I remember very, very well the first time Hunter took acid. I didn't have a clue about what this would mean, but I have a little boy in a crib, and I was terrified. I was just terrified that Hunter was going to be violent. And then he asked me for the gun. And I said, no. And he said, I want the gun. If you don't give me the gun, I'm throwing this boot through that window. And he did. And I was just really scared. Mostly I was scared for Juan. You know, I didn't know what might happen. And I reached up, you know, Hunter is 6'3", I'm 5'4.5". I reached up and just clawed. I mean, here the guy is on acid, you know, and I took my fingers and I just clawed his face, actually drew blood.
Thompson's next big literary assignment was an article on the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. But demonstrations outside the convention center soon turned ugly. The police used tear gas, dogs, and brute force to break up the crowd. Thompson, the young journalist, was caught in the middle.
He was in the crowds, and he saw many people beaten. Some people that he knew, and he just, and he saw the policemen beating these, you know, mostly young people. When he came back, I only saw Hunter cry twice in 19 years. He cried. He was telling me the story of how everyone was getting beaten, and it made a huge difference to him.
Thompson himself said the battles with police were a turning point. Years later, he proclaimed in Rolling Stone that week in Chicago was worse than the most grotesque acid trip, that it permanently changed his whole chemistry. Suddenly, it became essential to confront those who had slithered their way into power and were causing these things to happen.
He was deeply offended about what was happening in America, as most thinking people are. It's a great dream, America, but the reality is really upsetting frequently to people who can see the options and the possibilities.
You are on our property which you are defacing. If you do not leave, you will be subject to arrest.
Yeah, he was cared a lot about America. He was a real, you know, he was a Southern boy. He was an American.
Thompson was determined to somehow get into politics. When he moved his family north to Aspen, Colorado, he got his opportunity. He was asked to run for sheriff. He jumped at the chance to showcase his very own brand of politics.
It was different from a campaign would be now because there's an already established liberalist view of law enforcement in town. Back then, the sheriff before Hunter, Harold Whitmire, was your classic cowboy redneck sheriff. You know,
Marijuana laws are one of the reasons that has engendered this lack of respect that that cops complain about all over the country.
I think it's a good thing that Hunter Thompson is running, because I think it makes us all aware of the power that's involved in the job.
At least they have some new ideas, which is more than the old people.
Thompson advocated planting grass in the town's streets and punishing people who sold bad drugs. Michael Solheim was his campaign manager.
We would start with stuff like that, but then we would build into the ideas about the control of growth in this town. We were out doing meetings around town, mostly in the evenings at the various lodges and stuff, and inviting all the Aspenites to come and meet Hunter and listen to what his ideas are.
Remarkably, Thompson's campaign seemed to be gaining ground.
I remember one night we were sitting upstairs up there, and that was the day that it first occurred to us that we might win the damn thing. I said, what are we going to do if we win?
Okay, here's the totals. Whitmire, 204, Hunter, 173.
In the end, Thompson lost by less than 500 votes.
It's very hard to You know, to have a bald-headed lunatic, I'll do that for the cameras. Fellas.
Hooray!
I've already made up my mind, as a matter of fact. This is my last trip in politics. Or this kind of politics. I assure you I'll be another kind of politics. I'm not sure which way I'll go, but it'll be one or the other. It won't be down this middle anymore.
Once the running for office thing was behind, he preferred to be plotting up an owl farm and, you know, moving the pieces from behind the scenes. But when lending his celebrity to a cause would actually do some good, he wouldn't hesitate to do so.
Thompson would never run for office again, but for the rest of his life, he used his writing as a platform to rail against the establishment. It's the early hours of the morning. Hunter Thompson is alone. He's in constant pain. He has 14 hours before he will choose to end his life.
Well, physically, he was in crummy shape. You know, he'd had a surgery or two, and, you know, the bad broken leg and all that stuff takes a toll on anyone that age. So, yeah, he was in crummy shape.
At 3 a.m., Thompson calls Ben Fee and Juan.
Hey, Benny.
He wants company.
What are you guys doing? Tonight he's young. And at occasion is taking painkillers, which were not any better for him than they are for anybody else. And, you know, lots of painkillers make you depressed, and they kind of make your situation seem more and more trapped.
Thanks. Cheers.
Cheers.
And Juan and I went over and sat with Hunter for a long time, for several more hours. He had a moment where he was scared that he was going to have his freedom stripped, his ability to live the way he enjoyed to live, you know, with guns open on the counter. So we read his old works and tried to keep it light and upbeat, get his mind off of it.
You could strike sparks anywhere. There was
That sense of
fantastic.
inevitable victory.
It was about 7 in the morning when Hunter went to bed.
That was good.
And I asked Juan if he ever feared for his father's life. He didn't seem to believe that it was right around the corner. Juan knew his father and knew how it would end, but I don't think Juan saw it coming up like it did.
"35 years earlier, Hunter S. Thompson changed the face of journalism. He returned to the city of his birth, Louisville, to cover the Kentucky Derby for Scanlan's magazine. As the deadline for the article approached, the magazine became anxious to get their copy.
And they said, you have to send us something. He said, I don't have anything. All I have is garbage. And they said, well, you have to send it. I can't. It's not lucid. They said, send it to us. He sent it to them, and they said, this is great.
Even though Thompson wasn't convinced by his new style, others saw it as a breakthrough.
My view is that it actually was quite a polished piece. It was just rather of a radical style. And it was consistent with a kind of journalism that was getting more and more radical, starting with Norman Mailer on the steps of the Pentagon and Armies of the Night, and Tom Wolfe, you know, the acid Kool-Aid test, and this kind of personal journalism where you put yourself in the story and you write in the voice, the narrative voice that you recognize. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll narrative voice. It was like the way people talk.
Thompson's new style was a break from his previous work. It was considered so unique it was given a name: Gonzo journalism. Whether accidental or planned, Thompson's Gonzo style became more concrete in 1971, when he took a long, drug-frenzied journey from California to Las Vegas with attorney Oscar Acosta. They're somewhere in the deserts outside Barstow, California, when the cocktail of drugs explodes in his brain. Suddenly, even the simple act of driving becomes fraught with frightening visions. He audio hallucinates a terrible roar, while all around what looks like huge bats are swooping and screeching. Thompson screams, "Holy Jesus, what are these goddamn animals?" What Thompson had put to paper was wild, manic, and like nothing anyone else was writing. He's still ogling and groping the American dream, that pale, exhausted vision of the big winner stumbling like a drunk out of an impassive and stale Vegas casino. The articles he wrote were turned into a novel, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Hunter Thompson was just 34 years old, and already he'd created a classic.
He could cut to the sort of essence of the truth of what was going on by fictional techniques such as metaphor or imagination or fantasy. He was brilliant, absolutely.
But more than that, he'd created a fictional Hunter S. Thompson, the wild, drug-taking, bourbon-swilling Gonzo journalist at the center of the book. As Thompson grew older, he would find it increasingly difficult to play that character. After a short sleep, Hunter S. Thompson rolls out of bed. In 4 hours, he'll take his own life. His wife Anita is doing her best to forget the fight of the night before. She gets ready to drive into town for a yoga class.
Morning. It's Mr. Bowie. Good morning, Mr. Bowie. Okay, well, you have a nice day too.
The day begins like Thompson's days have for much of the last 50 years, with liberal amounts of alcohol.
Diggity dog. Protein. We're good.
It's very, very difficult to separate the writer from the bourbon drinker, and it never ever stopped. And it went on to his dying day. It was an essential part of him.
He was what I would call a professional drinker, and of course a famous drug user in a what I would call an intelligent way. That he wasn't a crash and burn sort of a guy.
Look, last night, is that it? I'm sorry.
At breakfast, Thompson tries to apologize to his wife Anita for pointing the gun at her the night before.
Control what? You know,
It was very difficult to live with Hunter. It was exciting. It was, at times, really loving and romantic. But I would say most of the time, it was very hard. Mostly because Hunter was so angry.
This was an impulsive person, attract and command attention, was a subject of adulation. He was novel, he was original. But with age, that impulsiveness ceases to be so much of an advantage. And when you no longer have the emotional high that comes from that kind of attention, how do you replace that?
I've been out of control for 50 years. I mean, what's new?
I gotta get out of here. I'm going to the gym.
As his wife leaves, she has no idea that this will be the last time she will see him alive. "33 years earlier, after the great success of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Rolling Stone magazine sent their new star on the road again. The assignment was to cover the 1972 U.S. presidential campaign.
We now in election day and elect George McGovern and defeat Richard Nixon. I'm concerned that Richard Nixon will be...
That's what this is all about. Thank you.
There was a feeling that this was an election that could defeat Nixon, that something exciting might happen. There wasn't such a clear distinction between the music and the politics. The music was going to set us free. That was our motto.
Thompson was supposed to bring the rock and roll mentality to the campaign.
Richard Nixon represents the dark side of the American dream. Richard Nixon stands to me for everything that I not only have contempt for, but dislike and think should be stomped out. Greed, treachery, stupidity, cupidity. Nixon represents everything that's wrong with this country. I mean, down the line. He can't even walk. You know, he walks around with this kind of, how are you? I'm Richard Nixon.
Tim Ferriss was an editor with Rolling Stone.
A button he had printed up once said, you know, I'm not like the others. He wasn't like the rest of the press corps. Even conservative American political figures like Pat Buchanan, you know, would say that Hunter was writing the funniest stuff about politics they'd ever read. It was really astonishing material.
Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72 was a collection of stories Thompson wrote about the race. It was supposed to be released immediately after the election, but Alan Rinsler, Thompson's editor, was getting increasingly worried about the deadline.
He and I had exchanged really hostile letters prior to this meeting, because I'm an intrusive kind of do what's needed to be done kind of hands-on editor. I didn't want to just wait for him. I knew he was notoriously late with everything. And what I realized ultimately was that he was not going to write this book. He was not going to finish it on time. I would have to actually sit with him the entire time. Food was brought in constantly, though he didn't eat much because he was taking so much speed. And cocaine. It was a non-stop, you know, 72 hours at a stretch, collapse, 72 more at a stretch, collapse kind of experience. And we had tape machines in those days. People would come pick up the tapes, rush away to the office, and work all night transcribing the tapes, or all day, and bring back the pages, and that was the kind of way you had to work to get it done with Hunter.
Not only was Rinsler dealing with a writer who found it hard to write, he was also dealing with an author who was finding it increasingly difficult to find his groove.
He tried to tune up his mind through drugs and alcohol to the point where he was having like grandiose visions and flights of tremendous creative imagination. I mean, it's true. And he'd try to capture that. But then there'd be too much of it, and then he'd start to turn to jelly, and he couldn't think straight at all.
Finally, after a huge consumption of narcotics and a great deal of help from his editor, the book was written. Once again, it was a success, but from here on, the writing got harder.
I've been with a lot of writers, and it's hard for everybody, but for Hunter, it got harder and harder. It was a hard act. He was himself a hard act to follow.
The drink and drugs that had once inspired Thompson became a permanent fixture, and bit by bit began to rot his brain.
Absolutely, you can't do that forever. He was a big, strong guy, and he had a high tolerance. But after 40, 50 years of steady, daily, never being sober, I think it gets to you. A lot of people I know from that era either died or disintegrated or straightened out.
After more than 30 years of fighting against the political tide of the United States, Thompson is preparing to withdraw from the race once and for all. It's February 20th, 2005. Hunter S. Thompson has gathered his family for one last weekend at his ranch in Aspen, Colorado. On the last morning of his life, his knee hurts, his hips hurt, his back is sore. In 2 hours, he will shoot himself.
Well, Hunter was extremely free. He insisted on his freedom, and he exercised his freedom to a degree that's unknown to most mortals on a day-by-day basis. And I'm not just talking about freedom of speech, but freedom of action. And when that freedom began to be limited by the fact that he couldn't walk right, that he was in physical pain from a bad back and back surgery, bad knee and stuff, bad broken leg, I think the thing that most troubled him about it was the prospect of that he was looking at a permanent narrowing of his freedom.
He'd been, blessed with an athlete's body all his life, and all of a sudden it all kind of starts to fold up at once over a short period of time. Is going to be a horrible blow to anyone. So his physical problems were a big part of his life at that point.
He types a cryptic word on his typewriter. It's the last thing he will ever write. Its meaning remains a riddle. It's 3:30, February 20th, 2005. Thompson calls his neighbour, Ed Bastian.
Hey, Eddie, get over here. 4 o'clock, get over here, all right? There's gonna be some shooting.
Hunter was someone who never expected to be 30 years old, much less 40 or 50. He lived his life knowing that he was living dangerously and enjoying himself on a day-by-day basis. It was he always emphasized that it was fine with him if he didn't live a long life. And as he got older, he often said that he wasn't afraid to commit, that this was a kind of an exit door that he regarded as being perfectly defensible.
Hunter S. Thompson has just 2 hours left to live. "26 years earlier, Thompson published The Great Shark Hunt. The book is a collection of his best writing stretching back to the early 60s. Thompson was only 41 years old, but already he was writing a retrospective. He compares it to etching words onto his own tombstone. There seems nothing left. He said all there is to say. Beyond, he can foresee nothing but a quick exit straight down, right off his 28th floor hotel terrace. No one could follow up his act, let alone Hunter S. Thompson."
Well, as you read his chronology throughout his career, one of the things that made him great was he took risks. He went into areas that were not necessarily safe for journalists, from his first work in Hell's Angels to the Chicago convention, and that riskiness paid off with his creativity. But also with that risk went a self-destructive strength.
Thompson continued to write articles for Rolling Stone, but nothing he did could win the same critical acclaim of his earlier works.
Once you'd written Hell's Angels and Fear and Loathing, you got to keep raising the bar. But Hunter's particular psyche and personality, he was, insecure, and he was, he was very anxious all the time.
So the money, the fame, the hallucinogenics, those are all different ingredients. And so Hunter began to morph. He began to change a bit. I had lived to help him be this great writer. Well, this great writer wasn't writing, and he wasn't writing great things. And what am I doing?
Sondi, Thompson's wife for over 15 years, had had enough of the Hunter Thompson circus and left.
I had no sense of myself. I didn't think I could do anything. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't this enough. I wasn't good enough. So when I left, I still loved Hunter, but there was no way that I could live this life anymore.
Thompson had become known as much for his excessive behavior as for his writing. Hunter S. Thompson, the writer, became more and more Hunter S. Thompson, the character.
And, when there'd be an event with a lot of people at our farm, Hunter would put on his sunglasses and the cigarette holder and the visor, and he'd become that public persona, and those of us who were closest to him would kind of back off and let the fans move in.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hunter S. Thompson!
Thompson began to cash in on his notoriety, charging large fees to appear in front of crowds of adoring students.
I saw him speak at Cal once, and he got up on the stage, he was so drunk, he just fell over and passed out. And people had paid a lot of money, and he was paid something like 25 grand to do that. He was on the stage for like 6 minutes. And that was his public persona for many of his public appearances.
I remember once Hunter was cited and had to pay a fine for setting off a fire extinguisher on stage at some talk he was giving somewhere. And he told me rather sheepishly that, I said, well, why'd you do that? And didn't you know that it was, there are statutes against it now? And he said, well, I thought it was expected of me.
Look at that moon.
But Thompson's wild antics weren't just for his public appearances.
I'm gonna blow the hell out of him. That wouldn't be good. Okay.
One of his favorite things was to get a gallon jar and fill it with gasoline.
I'm gonna move your gloves up, man. They're gonna goddamn get wet. You know that.
And there were these little exploding targets, but he'd attach them to a gallon of gasoline. The first time, he says, Michael, go into the living room and get a fire extinguisher. I go to get the fire extinguisher, and I'm standing about 20 feet away. He says, no, stand right here behind me. I said, Hunter, if I stand here and you catch fire, I'm gonna catch fire. So I'll just stand over there. He gave me a really disgusted look.
Fire was big, breaking glass. Yeah, blowing things up. Yeah, that's violence. That's chaos.
The first time I met him, he actually handed me, I'll never forget this, a fistful of lit Roman candles. They were lit. He said, here, Rizzler, hold this. You know, and it was like, if you're gonna play with me, you've gotta be fearless. And so I took them, and then they went off and just shot into the air.
Yeah, Hunter loved loud noises and explosions and unexpected things.
There's a theory about drug abuse and alcohol abuse that, in a sense, when you start using, you stop growing internally. And you don't mature, you don't develop as an adult. You're stuck in 16, 17, 18. And in many ways, I believe that's the key to Hunter's personality. He was a big kid.
His public appearances and outrageous behavior did nothing to tarnish his reputation. In the late 90s, his most famous book, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, became a Hollywood movie starring Johnny Depp. And when John Kerry ran for president in 2004, he could still invoke Thompson's name.
I'll give you 4 words to put you at ease. Vice President Hunter Thompson.
But even though Kerry could use Thompson's name to get a laugh, Thompson hadn't been taken seriously as either a political commentator or a writer in years.
Later on, as politics moved in its course and the country changed, to keep on with that kind of political commentary would have required learning quite a lot about how the landscape was changing, and Hunter wasn't really interested in doing that.
I don't think the books were very good, the last bunch of books. He got into kind of an ESPN sports writing thing that was kind of hack work. He just couldn't keep it up. And I think that starting in 1982 or 3, for the last 20 years of his life, his work was just to make a living and to provide a new product for publishers who were willing to pay him large advances because anything that with his name on it would sell. But the quality of his work, I think, really after 1982 just became repetitious and flat.
As the years dragged on, Thompson's writing was becoming increasingly irrelevant. As old age set in, he would rely on his favorite gun, a .45 Smith & Wesson, to make his final statement to the world. It's late afternoon. Hunter S. Thompson has less than half an hour left to live.
Hello. Hi, it's me.
His wife Anita calls from a local fitness club. Once again, Thompson apologizes for his behavior the night before. This is the last conversation Hunter Thompson will ever have.
Hunter was speaking with Anita on the phone, and they were reconciling, and he was speaking with her and telling her that everything was going to be okay.
Elsewhere in the house, Thompson's son Juan watches over his own son, 6-year-old Will.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm at the gym. I'm finishing up.
Place is a sea of Gonzo thongs, I hope?
Yes.
Well, listen, Dave, I'm sorry about last night. Okay, I'm sorry, but I really love you. Come on home, will you?
Okay, I love you too. Hunter? Hunter? Hunter?
Come on. What's wrong? What's wrong?
No.
Juan blew past me as I was on my way over, white as a ghost. I had no idea, but I could tell that something wasn't right.
I was with Bob Broaddus, our sheriff, and Bob got a call from one of his deputies saying that there'd been a gunshot out at Hunter's. And we all looked at each other and just knew that was it. That was it.
Jennifer and Will were horribly shaken. It was so surreal and shocking. I stepped closer, and Juan interrupted me, and he grabbed me and said, "Don't come closer, please."
Go.
My son to this day and my daughter-in-law both feel that they are glad that they were there to take care of things and also to see him and feel his body, and so that it was very, very real.
Hunter S. Thompson died at 5:45 p.m., February 20th, 2005. He was 67 years old.
He was born a genius, and he was born with that charisma. And he was also born with that tortured soul. And where that comes from, I don't know.
March the 4th, 1982. John Belushi is one of the most famous faces in America. Hollywood royalty.
John is an American hero, and his life was an American tragedy.
We all thought we were invincible back then. I mean, who doesn't when they're 23, 24 years old?
He was a good man, but a bad boy, but extremely funny.
He's a comic genius with a fatal flaw.
John did everything in his life to excess.
He was on a binge.
I was going to go out there that night. It was just that close.
Tragically, in 24 hours, Belushi will be dead, poisoned by a toxic overload of drugs. Los Angeles, March the 4th, 1982. It's midday, and John Belushi glides down Sunset Boulevard on his way to a power meeting. It will be his last. This is the beginning of his final 24 hours alive. Belushi has been using cocaine since he arrived in LA 4 days ago. His meeting is with the two men who, more than anyone, have been responsible for making him a star. Michael Eisner, the president of Paramount Pictures, and Belushi's manager, Bernie Brillstein.
The purpose of the meeting was to decide what movie John was going to do for his commitment to Paramount. It was like George Clooney. They were coming to talk George or John into this movie.
At the meeting, there's just one item on the agenda, Belushi's next movie. Eisner wants him to star in The Joy of Sex, a farcical takeoff on a popular sex manual. He's convinced it'll be a surefire moneymaker.
They saw him as a star that could put people in the seats, and there was a project that was hanging around the studio that wanted to get made. They had an option on it. They'd paid money to get it written, and they saw John as the expressway to get it done.
Belushi resists. His instincts tell him that The Joy of Sex will be a career-damaging disaster and a personal embarrassment.
He was saying, you have to read it, you're not going to believe it. And, you know, and he said they want me to wear a diaper in this movie. That's how it's going to open, like I'm a baby in a diaper.
I promise you it's going to be great.
During the meeting, Belushi receives a call from his friend and fellow actor, Dan Aykroyd. Aykroyd gives him some advice.
Oh, don't do that piece of shit. Are you kidding me? Come on. Get away, get away, get out, get away. Come home. It's the spring. Things will happen over the summer or the fall. We'll figure something out. I was writing Ghostbusters right then, which he would have been in. And I said, don't worry, John. We're going to cover. We're going to do great stuff, you know. Don't be pressured to do this. Come home.
Sounds good. Yeah, bye. Bye.
Belushi flatly refuses to do the movie.
It was very nice. No one yelling. It was no crazy thing. And it was finally decided that it was a stalemate. You know, no one was going to do anything.
But Belushi has a hidden agenda. He's battling an addiction that's getting the better of him.
All right, I'll get it for you. How much is it going to cost me? $1,800.
John Belushi, God bless him, is an addict A to Z. And just like every other addict, it's a deadly disease. And there's always reasons that people use, but fundamentally it's the addiction that kills them.
Just 3 years earlier, Belushi had the #1 movie, the top-rated TV show, and the #1 album, all at the same time. No other entertainer had ever done that.
Well, that's one of those career highlights that one gets once in a career. John had Soul Man at the top of the record charts. He had Saturday Night Live at the top of late-night television. And he had the #1 comedy in the nation. And we all shared the abundance. And it was a time of celebration and, you know, massive adrenaline rushes and just really good times.
It was a heck of a ride. It was a good ride, most of the time. For a couple times, just hanging on, but it was scary sometimes. It was exciting. It was fun. It was innovative. It was different. Life with John was very fast. It always was fast. He always was on a fast track. He had a lot to do. He was very busy. John was a person who seemed on a mission in general in life. Like a little tornado. He just went through life and brought people along, and I think that most people enjoyed their time, but he did have more energy than most people.
Belushi was a comic genius. He was unpredictable, outrageous, a master of slapstick.
Like Keaton or Chaplin, any of those people, and I would definitely compare him to those people as a comedian. He had a great ability to physicalize. So he could make you laugh by raising his eyebrow.
He wanted to do more, to branch out into more serious roles. But the studios only wanted the Belushi they knew from his earlier movies.
They'd love to have me do Animal House Goes to Camp, Animal House Joins the Army, Animal House rides a space shuttle, you know, but it's not the way I work. You know?
The trouble is, Belushi hasn't had a hit movie in 3 years, and the pressure is beginning to take its toll. John Belushi has turned down the sex comedy the studio have lined up for him. Next, he changes the agenda. He's borrowed money from his manager before and now tells him he wants cash to buy a guitar.
Come on, Bernie.
And we had cash in the office, and I gave him $1,800 cash. It was me. God knows I didn't know what was going to happen.
But the money is not for a guitar.
To be at the meeting that he allegedly came here for and to ask for money for drugs in the middle of the meeting, that's good drug addict behavior. That's how they behave. What's going through his head is, where am I going to get my next hit? Where can I get drugs?
With $1,800 in his pocket, Belushi's drug binge is about to hit a new and dangerous level. Belushi's cocaine addiction began 7 years earlier on the set of Saturday Night Live.
America was ripe for a new generation of humor, and we just hit it at the right time. Of course, we were absolute rebels, and really ill-behaved and really bratty and ratty.
Why me, man? I mean, why me?
I think there was just an attitude of rebellion and irreverence, and don't trust the old order, which was part of why the show could succeed.
In the late 70s, there was also a new attitude to drugs. Cocaine was easy to source, and the television industry was fueled by it.
Monday, we come up with an idea. Tuesday, we wrote it. Wednesday, we read it. Thursday, we blocked it. And Saturday, it was on the air. It was, for a writer, it was great. We got to produce our own pieces. We were given a lot of autonomy. So from that point of view, it was wonderful. But it was video commando time. We were live. There was a lot of pressure and stress. I relieved it by punching out the ceiling in my dressing room so I had a little more air. People thought that was a temper tantrum. That wasn't. That was merely me physically trying to get a little more space in there because I was feeling claustrophobic. We let off steam on the weekends after the show.
To be there and work there was to be like in a subway station for the rich and famous. To be at a party where, there'd be Keith Richards and William Burroughs and Baryshnikov and Andy Warhol, plus the cast, plus people from Hollywood, all in the same place. And so that's sort of unduplicatable. But it's also a great lesson because after that, there's hardly a party that is going to really impress me now.
The cast once had to do 4 shows in a row without a break. By the last week, almost everyone was using cocaine to keep going.
It's 3 in the morning and you have to think of 3 more jokes before 5 a.m. and you're falling asleep and someone puts out a line of cocaine. You have to be extremely strong-willed not to do it, simply because you need to stay awake. Not because you're going to be funnier.
For Belushi and many on the show, coke was seen as just a harmless stimulant, virtually risk-free.
Business.
Thank you very much. You can go.
The entire culture had found this new thing, cocaine. And it's easy. If I take a sniff, you'll get fun. You're not putting a needle in your arm. It's very clean.
It was perceived as a drug that would help creativity. It would assist in loquaciousness and solving the world's problems and exchanges. So it was just prevalent and ubiquitous. And I think to John, it was something that kept him up at night. It stimulated his thinking.
But Belushi seemed to be using more than anyone else. He started going on binges.
I think with John in particular, his appetites were always big, and that's where, part of his problem was. He always did a little more than anyone else. He always went a little longer than anyone else.
John was a man of the night. He loved being John Belushi. He loved to sing in clubs. And at the time, I believe people were doing a lot of drugs. And I don't think he separated himself from the drugs. But it wasn't big-time drugs. It was just really, you can't go back and understand that time. It was the time of Studio 54. It was a time of great separation of young people and old people. And a lot of people were doing drugs who couldn't handle them, including adults, people, lawyers, everyone. So if you kept John out of trouble and kept him focusing on what he was doing and his career, which he really didn't care about then. Well, when you get hot so fast, you don't have time to care. You think, more, they'll keep giving me more.
John had an insatiable appetite for everything, for life, for all of the tastes and pleasures and sensations, from, motorcycle speed to, to a good, to 3 pieces of cherry pie.
And he seemed like a bull. People thought he could do anything.
And at that period of history, people didn't acknowledge the potential risk. There was a lot of sort of whatever sort of feeling about drugs and alcohol. They had no distinction between abuse and addiction. Addiction, you can't stop, even when you want desperately to stop. It's a biological process. It's different for different people, and once you cross that line or throw that switch, you're there. It's really a question of pharmacology and biology than any real psychological issue. The speed with which you get there sometimes has to do with what's going on emotionally with you, because you're looking for solutions, trying to feel better, can't regulate, can't trust. But once you're there, you're there.
Everyone thought it was the hippest thing in the world. And no one thought they'd die from it. No one.
Without realizing it, over the 3 years he worked on the show, Belushi developed the addiction to cocaine that he would struggle with for the rest of his life. John Belushi has 22 hours left to live. Using the cash he borrowed from his manager, he's on a mission to score some drugs. He's barely slept in the past 4 days. He arrives at a friend's apartment. She has a valuable contact who's also there, Kathy Evelyn Smith, a dealer and junkie.
How you doing? Welcome to LA. How are you?
Smith has spent years traveling with rock bands, supplying them with drugs. The 3 of them do coke. Belushi's wife Judy is at their home in New York. She knows he left for LA on a mission to get high and tried to stop him.
He was on a binge, and I wanted to, knew if he went back, it wasn't going to end. He had a mindset and just plowed right ahead. Made the choice.
Belushi's friend Dan Aykroyd is also in New York, at his office just a couple of blocks from Judy.
The thing is, with John, he didn't even have to buy it. People loved him so much, they wanted to hang out with him and socialize with him. So they would buy it for him and give it to him. Like, he would show up at a party and they'd automatically, here, have fun. And he would be collecting all this coke, and it was, Judy's job and my job sometimes to confiscate without his knowledge and get rid of it.
With his wife and best friend on the other side of the country, Belushi is far away from those who care about him. He now takes some of the cash he got from Brillstein and gives it to Smith, sending her off to get more drugs. This time, it's not for cocaine. Belushi wants heroin. He's losing control, sliding deeper into his drug-fueled binge, and there's no one around to tell him to stop. Just 2 years earlier, Belushi and Aykroyd were about to take the Blues Brothers on tour. They'd created the characters on Saturday Night Live, and the movie had been a smash hit. But Belushi knew he had a problem, and he wanted to deal with it for the tour. He hired a bodyguard, Smokey Wendell, to keep him away from cocaine.
He said, I have all this going on, the Animal House, the Saturday Night, and I'm working on these other projects, and all of a sudden, It's just going too fast for me. And if I don't somehow get a hold of myself and get control of myself, I won't be around in the next 2 or 3 years.
Smokey was great. He was ex-New York State Police, ex-Louisiana State Police, and ex-Secret Service. He had gone with Nixon to China. He was a very colorful and wonderful character who had John's best interest at heart.
I was asking him why he was so dependent on it. Why did you always have to feel the need to go? Because most of the time, it's usually basically loneliness, pressure, more insecurities in yourself that you can't live up to that. And I believe when we talked about it, it was that. People always wanting him to be funny, people always wanting him to be on. There was no space. So that's why he would have to go to Candyland.
On Belushi's last day, the drug that had once offered an escape was now controlling his every move. It's late afternoon, and John Belushi has less than 19 hours left to live. After doing cocaine with Kathy Smith, he asks her to score heroin. Belushi then returns to his apartment at the Chateau Marmont in Hollywood. He makes a number of phone calls, first to Brillstein saying he's changed his mind. He will do the joy of sex after all. Next, a call to Michael Eisner, head of Paramount, telling him the same thing. Belushi now phones Eisner's senior vice president, Jeff Katzenberg, and arranges to meet on Friday.
Tomorrow afternoon. Sure.
In a typically outrageous Belushi move, he tells the Paramount executive to give him a wake-up call.
Okay.
Katzenberg writes it in his calendar.
Thanks.
The executives believe Belushi is now on board.
I have medical students every day in my unit, and I always train them to put their fingers in their ears when an addict is talking to them, because what they say is all bullshit, it's all obfuscation, it's all distortion, it's all their brain trying to find a way to get them out of there so they can continue using. So what you got to respond with an addict is how they make you feel, and learn to sort of intuitively read all that. And so this issue of John weighing out scripts and being so disturbed by that, there's no addict I know gets into that kind of nuance. It's more that he wanted to go use, he didn't want to do anything.
True to form, the next call Belushi makes is to Kathy Smith to find out if she's scored the heroin. He wants to hook up immediately.
Kathy, it's John. Yeah. How fast can you get here?
His brain at that point will be going, use or die, use or die. The brain believes if it doesn't continue using, and believe is not really an accurate word, it manifests through neurobiological mechanisms that if the individual doesn't continue using, they will die. So use or die.
Belushi shows no signs of slowing down. He and Kathy Smith spend the next 4 hours constantly on the move. Buying and consuming drugs, the pace frenetic and surreal. At one point, Belushi calls Dan Aykroyd in New York.
He left me a message, a slurred, drunken, kind of message that was just indecipherable. And I heard that on the answering machine, and then I just continued working.
But Belushi's message worries Aykroyd. He'd been on the receiving end of these calls before. He walks from his office to Judy Belushi's Greenwich Village apartment. He and Judy have to take action.
It was clear we, had to help stop him, try to get him some other kind of help. I think Danny felt very immediately worried. He may have been more in touch with the reality of it from having heard that tape.
They decide they have to rescue John and get him out of Los Angeles. Judy calls Smokey at his home in Virginia.
She said, do you think you can find some time for John? And I had always told her, never thinking it would happen. I always said, hey, if you ever need time, I will make time. Whatever I'm doing, I would do. And I said, okay, fine, I'll be out there tomorrow.
Smokey tells Judy he'll fly to LA and bring Belushi home. But tragically, he didn't get to make that journey for her. Judy and John were childhood sweethearts. They met at high school. She was 15, he was 17.
The first time I saw John, he was on stage. He was doing the varsity show, the big event in town. I'd seen a lot of these shows, and he was one of the best, and I knew it immediately. This guy has talent.
They grew up in Wheaton, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. John came from a family of hard-working Albanian immigrants.
His parents weren't really happy together, and I feel that he knew that, sensed it, and I think that, you know, kids are unhappy if their parents are unhappy. And I think a little bit of his humor around the house when he was young had to do with learning early that he could make his mother laugh, that she was a good audience, and maybe a little bit feeling like by making her laugh, he was making her happier. But I think also as he grew up, he realized, well, I know, he said to me he could never make his mother happy. And I think, you know, that's one of those things that kids really suffer from.
Dan Payne was Belushi's high school drama teacher. He remembers the first time he saw Belushi. It was at an audition.
The music director said, well, John, what are you going to do? He said, and he just started, he said, well, I was going to tell some stories. And he started telling things. You know, he was like a stand-up. And they were really funny. And all you could hear, the other students waiting to audition, standing backstage, they were all laughing. So this guy said to me, this guy's hilarious. The kids just love him. We're going to put him in the show. He fit in everywhere, and I don't quite know why. He was short. He was stubby. I never, you know, you've seen the pictures of him. I don't think you'd say he was a nice-looking kid, good-looking guy, but he was not, quote, handsome. He wasn't the big blonde idol kind of guy. He was just sort of there, you know? But people, he would just, there was something about, it was very magnetic personality.
By the time John finished high school, he was the football captain, the homecoming king, and voted most popular student. He liked to surround himself with people and always stood out in the crowd.
I would say that John needed the group. He was a tough guy. I mean, alpha male, Illinois, heterosexual, toughie, but with, you know, an open heart. I mean, he was very sensitive and vulnerable, and this is partly the reason that he came to the demise that he did, that he trusted people.
Tragically, on his last day, Belushi now put his life in the hands of a known junkie. It was to be a fatal error. It's now early evening, and Belushi has less than 14 hours left to live. He and Kathy Smith arrive at the Roxy nightclub, a Hollywood landmark that leads to an exclusive upstairs bar on the rocks. Celebrities can do what they want here without being bothered. Slipping through a side door into the bar, Belushi is agitated, his mind racing. He's complaining to anyone who'll listen about the pressure he's under to do the joy of sex and the pressure of being John Belushi. Belushi and Smith go to the bathroom. A potent cocktail is being prepared, a mixture of cocaine and heroin that produces an immediate euphoric rush. It's called a speedball. Belushi has just upped the ante. He's about to inject cocaine, and he's added a powerful opiate to the mix, heroin.
It's an extremely powerful delivery of large doses of the drug right to the brain. And what you see in humans when they're delivering the cocaine by this mechanism, they begin behaving like laboratory animals. Laboratory animals, when you give them free access to cocaine, will use straight for a couple weeks and die. That's just about what humans do. They will either run out of money or they will die. And a binge on cocaine, as I've said, is where the first hit feels great, the next however many, each one feels subsequently worse until you develop a psychosis. It always develops. You know you're going there, and yet you can't stop from starting it. And once you start, you can't stop till you're done, till you run out of money or something horrible happens to you.
Belushi and Smith spend 5 hours at On the Rocks, making more than one trip to the bathroom. Belushi seems unable to stop.
By the way, if John Belushi stayed in Wheaton, Illinois, where he was born, he would have been the same guy. Same way. You can't blame someone for someone's drug problem. It's the person who thinks he can handle it, then all of a sudden he can't. And when you're doing drugs, all you want are drugs. You don't want a career.
John was really good at creating characters, but he hadn't gone through the maturity, which there's no age for it. But I think maybe it was a little, it was late. He was 33 when he died. He hadn't gotten to the point where he let go of the child, didn't let other people define him, and decided for himself that he was who he was, a good person, worthy of everything good that came to him, and those kind of ideas that I think give you your strength. And he didn't have that.
On his last day, Belushi is a shadow of his former self. His body is slowly being destroyed by the drugs he's consuming. It was all very different when Belushi was in his 20s. After college, he moved to Chicago with Judy. It was here he got his start at the training ground for America's top comedians, the famous Second City Theater.
He knew that night. He said that night, "This is what I want to do. I'm gonna get up here one day."
In 1971, he did. He went straight to the main stage without having to train with one of the touring companies. That had never happened before, nor has it been repeated since.
Oh, it was incredible. He walked on stage, he didn't have to open his mouth. One knew that he had enormous presence, and then he turned out to be a good actor.
Belushi was a high-octane performer. He pushed at the boundaries for the rest of the cast.
Of course, it was the perfect scene for John because he was given permission to be insane, you know. And John was one of, like, our bellwether. He sort of rode point for us as our little comedy wagon train went out into the wilderness. If John went, wherever John went, you know, anything south of John was sane.
An actor has a very ambiguous position vis-a-vis an audience. He has to expose himself to them, so to speak, and he has to ask them for his confirmation. And there's something in him that needs to ask, and something in him which hates that need to ask.
There was no sign of the addiction problems to come that were to destroy Belushi.
When he was at Second City, I think he was still young enough and buoyant enough that he didn't need a lot of pharmaceuticals to amuse him. He was so just thrilled to be on stage. I don't think he was more pharmaceutically inclined than the culture around him.
He had an enormous amount of self-assurance and confidence, way beyond either his age or his level of achievement. He just knew he would make it, and you knew he would make it.
Chicago was, I think, a big formative time for John. He was on top of the world there. It was the safest place to be. He was successful. He was supported by his teammates. People would come in from out of town to look at him and say, "You're doing a great job. Come out and screen test for us." But he could always return home to Chicago. He could count on the audience to embrace him. He knew what restaurants to go to. He knew where to get coffee at 2 in the morning if he wanted to take a walk. He had nice roommates. He had Judy, who was fabulous and supportive in Iraq. It was he still had a dream. And so I think nothing could compare to those days.
After Second City, Belushi got his break on Saturday Night Live. But everything changed when he won a part in the low-budget movie Animal House. He became an international superstar overnight.
Opening night, I had never seen anything like it in New York. It was just crazy. The theater was crazy.
So it was a big night. It was a premiere, and it was in New York City, and he was like, one of the stars of the movie, and it was a moment of innocence. because we went forward from that room, and I don't think it was ever the same. You know, it's just took a turn. It wasn't all bad by any means. There was a lot of good that happened after that, but it was just sort of a real moment that changed after that.
Well, you get to those heady atmospheres, it's sometimes tough to stay anchored, and I think that was certainly a factor in the usage of the cocaine and the vulnerability of John, the people who were preying upon him and kind of sucking his energy in that psychic vampire sense, you know.
It had taken Belushi just 7 years to make it. On his 30th birthday, he'd reached superstar status. He was #1 in every medium, film, TV, and rock and roll. But in 3 short years, he would lose it all. It's close to midnight, and Belushi is still reeling from the combination of cocaine and heroin he's been injecting into his bloodstream. After 5 hours at the bar, Belushi and Smith leave. Belushi tells Smith to stop the car. He opens the door and throws up. Now they're heading back to the Chateau Marmont, Belushi's final destination. At bungalow number 3, Belushi rushes to the bathroom and is sick again. Belushi and Smith smoke a joint. He picks up his guitar, strums a few chords, and passes out. A few seconds later, he abruptly comes to. 3:15 a.m. Kathy Smith injects Belushi with one more speedball. It will be his last. Earlier, at the height of his fame, Belushi came close to beating his addiction. Before taking the Blues Brothers on tour, he hired bodyguard Smokey Wendell. Smokey's brief was to keep Belushi away from drugs. He was put to the test on his first day. Belushi was in a recording studio learning a song for the tour. Wendell spotted an outsider talking to Belushi.
These were people that would be commonly known as suppliers. They would be able to produce party favors.
Smokey watched the dealer go into the bathroom after talking to Belushi. Smokey then went into the bathroom himself and found the drugs.
John went into the bathroom, came back, said a few words to the guy, which I knew it was basically whatever was there was no longer there. John went back in the booth, the guy went back in. So we did this 3 times. We played this game. 3rd time, John was getting really annoyed with the gentleman.
Smokey then approached the dealer standing by the coffee table.
And I said, you know, there are many ways to sweeten coffee. I happen to like sweet and low. Sweet and low looks very much like this. And I had poured it into the coffee. At that point, I said to the gentleman, I said, you know, we could do this all day. I just don't know how much money you can afford to lose. And the guy, got totally very uncomfortable.
The dealer tried another tactic, slipping some cocaine into a cigarette pack. Belushi announced that he wanted a smoke and picked up the cigarettes.
And he was going to put it in his pocket. Well, then I knew that there was a favor in there. That turned into a physical altercation with John and I. It was a tug of war, and we were wrestling on the floor in the studio. And the 2 guys that ran the studio, they were, I don't believe this. I can't believe this. And we got up and I said, John, look, if you want to do this, then you don't really need me here. If you don't, I mean, this is going to happen every day.
It worked. We did a tour with the Blues Brothers, and that was grueling because we had, 20 shows in 16 cities. And, we were able to meter the dosages, and John performed beautifully and effectively, and we had a great, lucid, clear, creative time. And so Smokey worked.
Belushi kept clean for the entire tour. He desperately wanted to win his battle against addiction. And by the end of the tour, he was in such good shape, Smokey felt it was time to move on.
And we had him working out and losing weight, and he would he said, oh yeah, the highlight of my high tonight was I got 2 more push-ups in. But he would laugh, and that would be his way of saying, hey, I can do this. He would find time to come and talk to me. I would be asleep downstairs, and he would knock on the door. And it was basically, I think he was at that point where he didn't want to sleep, he didn't want to go out, and he just wanted to talk. And it would be either about the work or the job, plans, ideas he has, his wife, how much he loved Judy, how much she meant to him. And I mean, on more than one occasion, he would say to me, whatever she needs, whatever she wants, don't ever question, you just do it. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. I said, well, then you can't question why we're sitting here together, because this is what she wants. And he just smiled, and he said, boy, you got me again. And that's when I knew, as we kept bonding, that he wanted this, and then it was becoming easier and easier for him. And at that point, I was looking to move on to the next, and I just said, I think you're okay to go on. And I remember him being so disappointed. And I remember him saying to me, what is it? Do you want a car? Do you want, I'll pay you more. I'll pay you. I said, it's not that. John, you don't need me.
The following summer was one of Belushi's happiest, spent at his favorite place, Martha's Vineyard. It would be his last.
It was beers and wines and occasionally a little of the green stuff, but no powders or pills that summer, and it's certainly reflected in the picture where he's standing with Judy belly to belly. He's got a blue shirt on and a hat, and you can see how good his color is. He's got the full weight on. There's no gauntness there. And it was a summer of body surfing, Jeep rides, running on the beach, dodging sharks. He was truly off and relaxed then. Those were wonderful moments.
He did have more energy than most people, and that was his, need to slow down sometimes was something he had trouble doing. But once he got slow, he was real slow. Put him on a beach, and he could stay there all day. Just keep bringing some food, water. He'd be fine.
At the end of the summer, Hollywood came calling again. Belushi agreed to star in the comedy Neighbors with Dan Aykroyd.
Well, Neighbors we shot at night on Staten Island, and again at that time, Coke was ubiquitous, and everybody was using it like coffee. It was to keep us up at night.
But for Belushi, it meant temptation.
He tried what we call white knuckle it. He tried to just avoid all this. You can only do that so long. It's like trying not to eat. You can only go so long without eating. Eventually, you're going to eat.
He stopped lots of times. Yeah. He had a fairly long, seemingly successful time. But in retrospect, clearly whatever that wasn't dealt with. He was just in abstinence. It's like the dry drunk, if you stop drinking, but you haven't, it's the same thing. Whatever that is, whatever that's about.
Getting people off drugs is the easiest thing in the world. Anybody can get off drugs. The problem is staying off. And that's where the whole treatment process comes in. Now, many people believe, A, they can control it themselves, and you see this is not a volitional process, so they can't. Or that, B, they could substitute it with something else, like exercise and yoga and all these things. And that will work for a time. But inevitably, when there's a stress, when there's drugs available, they will relapse.
He could be triggered because he didn't feel, he had a scene on the show he really wanted to be on, and it wouldn't be on, and that could trigger it. He could have had some great success. It was so exciting that it triggered it. So I just think drug addiction, ultimately, there is some kind of chemical imbalance or dysfunction going on, and I think there seems to be new research all the time, and maybe one day someone can tell us all about this, but I really don't know. I just don't know.
Intervention back then was not a tool that was used. Today, if we had a problem like this, we'd get 6 to 10 people together. We'd get the guy or girl in the room and sit them down and say, it's going to stop, you're going into rehab, that's it, and the flex cuffs would come out. Now, I mean, now that's what we do. Back then, that was not, you know, not a technique that was widespread.
After filming Neighbours, Belushi's cocaine addiction took hold again. With each hit, he was slowly killing himself. And on his final day, he was far from those who could have saved him. It's just before dawn. John Belushi has 6 hours left to live. He's been injecting cocaine and heroin all day. He complains of feeling cold. Kathy Smith puts him to bed and turns up the heat. Belushi lapses into sleep or unconsciousness.
He's dying of his disease at this point. This is not an overdose. This is toxic, chronic toxic effects on the body, overwhelming him finally.
Smith writes a letter and orders toast and coffee from room service. At 10:15 a.m., she makes one last check on Belushi. He's snoring. She puts her drug paraphernalia, a syringe and spoon, into her purse and leaves. Belushi is now alone in the bungalow. His wife Judy and best friend Aykroyd are at home in New York.
Sure, I mean, I felt like I should have been with him that whole time out there. It would have been different if I was there. But you come back to a point where you realize, well, first of all, it might not have been different if I was there. And it's just a life, you know, life. You gotta let go of it. You gotta know that's what that's what happened. That's all that you can. There's no more. That's it. Can't redo. So.
Or I was going to go out there that night. You know, it was just that close. You know, it was really close, like a hair close. You know. Yeah. To you know, of course, I will always feel for the rest of my life that maybe I didn't do enough, and but he was alienating us at the end as well, you know, and pushing us away, and he'd get real mad if you took the coke away, and you know, and you know, it was. But I'll live with that for the rest of my life. That we didn't get there in time.
Belushi has been lying unconscious in his hotel bed for hours. Then at 12 p.m., Bill Wallace, Belushi's assistant, arrives at the bungalow with a typewriter Belushi wanted for script writing.
John!
Wallace immediately senses something is wrong. He can't hear John's usual snoring.
John, come on. We're gonna be late.
He walks into the bedroom telling Belushi it's time to get up. Belushi is curled up on his right side. Wallace shakes him. There's no response. He discovers Belushi is not breathing. His first instinct is to call Brillstein.
We're in trouble. First words, we're in trouble. What do you mean in trouble? He's sleeping, won't get up? No, he's having a problem breathing. And I said, oh. And I went into action like I knew what I was doing. I had my assistant call 911.
John, come on, wake up, John. Come on, John, wake
Wallace pounds on Belushi's chest, tears in his eyes, crying, "You dumb son of a bitch."
Wake up! Come on, John.
I went to the Cedar Sinai to wait at the emergency entrance so no one would know John was coming over.
At the Chateau Marmont, paramedics place Belushi on the floor. Not knowing he's already dead, they suspect a heart attack. They try to revive him, but soon give up.
Is that all you're gonna do?
Wallace protests, but they say it's too late. John Belushi died on the morning of the 5th of March, 1982. At the Cedars-Sinai Hospital, Brillstein waits and waits. The ambulance is not coming.
And finally, one of my assistants called and said, Bernie, you can come home, John is dead. And what do you do when you're alone in a phone booth? No one had a cell phone then. And one of your best friends died. You can't believe it. I, of course, felt responsible. You know? I know everyone says this wasn't your fault. He would have gotten the money someplace else. But I gave him the 1,800 bucks. You know? Do I wish I hadn't? Sure. It was his money. You know? He had made it for me. I gave it to him. And I guess the guitar is still there.
The police arrive at the Chateau Marmont, then the media. The word will soon be out.
The first thought I had was, Judy's gonna hear it on the radio. I called Danny in his 25th Street office, got him on the phone, said, Danny, don't ask me what to do. I'm telling you, John is dead. It's not a joke.
I was writing Ghostbusters at the time, and I was writing a line for him when the call came from Mr. Brillstein that he'd gone. And I immediately got up and went outside to get to Judy. I didn't want to take a cab. I didn't want to be carried. I had to move myself. Otherwise, I would have just buckled to my knees. And I ran down to Judy's from 5th and 23rd. I ran down to Morton Street.
I heard someone punching the lock and run up the stairs, and it was Danny.
And I told her before anyone else knew, you know, that he was gone. And, but it was essential for me to get there before she heard it from someone else. So.
And, you know, that's a real good friend. Okay. So.
It was 2 weeks later that coroner Thomas Noguchi confirmed the cause of death.
The office issued the official death certificate described as acute cocaine and heroin intoxication.
An examination of Belushi's arms revealed that he'd been injecting for some time.
He had injection sites both sides. I mean, no, this is not an overdose. This is toxic effect of intravenous drugs. It's hard for me to believe that he was doing intravenous drugs for only 4 or 5 days. This does not look like that kind of situation at all. It's like somebody's been doing it for a while and finally dies of it.
Kathy Smith was arrested and eventually served 18 months in prison for her part in the tragedy. She was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. Every year, thousands of fans still make the pilgrimage to Martha's Vineyard just to stand at Belushi's grave.
So somehow he's just touched people in that way. And I think when you actually have people feeling that you've made a difference in their life, then they don't forget you.
"4 years of television and 7 movies, and we're still talking about him. Isn't that amazing?"
You get a sense that we do meet those who've gone before, and we meet them in the form that we knew them. And they meet us in the form that they knew us. And just for a while, not forever, not for eternity, there is a reunion there. And it's going to be one rockin' night.